Hey guys, today's video is on psychological strategies to enhance performance and aid recovery. So first of all, we've got a series of psychological strategies. So athletes will either use them for trying to enhance their performance or relax from their performance afterwards. So you've got a couple there, PST, which is psychological skills training, and that's practicing one or more of the following. So there's a series and it's called psychological skills training. So you've got sleep, either dealing with optimal arousal or motivational techniques, mental imagery, or concentration. So looking at sleep, it's recommended that everyone gets 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night. Some people need less, some people need more, but that's an average. The issue arises when someone accumulates sleep debt, which is basically if you have a few nights in a row without sleep, then you end up clocking up too many hours without sleep and you'll start to suffer psychologically and physically. So you'll end up reducing your concentration levels, memory loss, usually just short term. Decision making is slower, and also learning difficulties increase. So I've got a picture there of a little kid who's fallen asleep on his books. That's exactly what happens, and if this is the case in an elite competition, obviously athletes will be at a disadvantage compared to those who have had plenty of sleep in the weeks prior. Looking at optimal arousal, this is a thing called in the zone, and this is where athletes are either under aroused, over aroused, or just in the right zone. So basically if someone is too relaxed or not hyped up enough, then they're going to be under aroused, and the worst case scenario there, where the red X is on the screen, is sleep, and that means their emotional arousal is low and therefore their performance is very low. You could have the extreme opposite end as well. Someone is too hyped up, too stressed, too motivated, and basically too emotionally aroused, and that means that they are almost in a state of panic. And then obviously that will impair performance also. So what you want is an athlete to be in the zone, which is where the star is. That's called optimal arousal, and this whole theory is called the inverted U theory. So basically what you want is an athlete smack bang in the middle, and that's where their performance rises above the rest. Now, when you're looking at optimal arousal, you either want to reduce it or heighten it. So with reducing arousal, so if the person is too highly aroused, or in the panicky state or stressed, basically you want them to do a few things. You can have them meditate, and that's basically just focusing the mind in a relaxed state, in a quiet zone, and the person is not focusing on anything except their performance or one particular thought. You can try progressive muscle relaxation, which is where an athlete or anyone can do this, where you progressively tense and then relax muscles throughout the body. So you probably start with the toes, then the feet, then the calves, and so on. You'd look at breathing control, so doing a controlled amount of breaths per minute just to relax the body, and also stress inoculation training. That sort of means you slowly sort of expose yourself to more and more stressful situations performing your particular sport, and therefore you're sort of, immunizing yourself against the stress that you might encounter when you're performing. And then biofeedback, which is just basically looking at how the body responds. A good one for this is using heart rate monitors. So say if you had someone who's performing, you put a heart rate monitor on them, you track where the heart rate spikes are, and then you focus on trying to reduce arousal at those particular points in the performance. Then you've got trying to promote arousal or heighten it. And this sort of means that the person is not motivated enough, and they're not excited enough about their sport, and they're just not laid back, but just can't get excited about it. So there's a few things that they can do. Elevated breathing rate, so trying to quicken their breathing. Acting energized, so jumping about, maybe to some music. You've got listening to music there, putting on dance music or really peppy music for someone to sort of dance about to, and act energetically. And generally that sort of tricks the mind into thinking that it should be more aroused. Positive self-talk, I can do this, I've prepared, that sort of thing. And also energizing imagery, so imagining thoughts in the mind where you're quite energetic, times when you've been really positive in your life. And also a pre-competition workout sometimes does the trick, so a bit of exercise just before the competition gets your body into an active mode. All right, motivation is basically an issue when athletes sort of lose track of their goals. So a motivation is a cause of behavior. So when someone does something, there's always a motivation behind it. There's there's an intrinsic motivation and an extrinsic motivation. With athletes, intrinsic motivation sort of looks at an athlete is sort of driven by their own personal goals, and they want to achieve a particular time, or they want to get to a particular ranking, that sort of thing. An extrinsic motivator for an athlete would be something like money, or prizes, so things that come from the external environment. And then you've got positive and negative motivation. So you can positively motivate someone with praise and reward, or you can negatively motivate them with consequences such as punishment, or if you don't perform well, someone's going to say something to you, or you'll have shame, that sort of thing. So that's negative motivation. So to sort of achieve the perfect motivation, we have athletes set goals, SMARTer goals. And SMARTer stands for specific, measurable, accepted, realistic, time-bound, exciting, and recorded. So each of those aspects have to apply to the goal. So, for example, it has to be a specific goal. There's no point, say if you wanted to lose some weight, there's no point saying, I'm going to lose some weight this year, because that's just way too broad. So what you would do is make it way more specific, and you would say, I'm going to lose 2 kilos in the next 2 weeks. And that also sort of matches the time-bound thing too, because you've got 2 weeks. So making sure goals match each of those points ensures that the goal is actually a SMART goal and it's actually achievable for the athlete. Okay, so imagery is an interesting one. It's a form of simulation where athletes imagine, or they visualize themselves doing the skill before they actually go and perform it. And the focus is that the skill is done perfectly. And so it's sort of, there's a theory behind it that says that the mind sort of accepts what you imagine. So if you can imagine the skill vividly enough, being done perfectly by you in an appropriate environment, then it should imply that the brain remembers that. And so when you actually go and perform the skill, then it should mimic slightly what you were imagining. The athlete has to focus on a few things. So how the skill should feel when it's performed, so kinesthetic sort of stuff, what the skill should actually look like, what sounds should be present. So if they perform in front of a crowd, they have to imagine the crowd in there as well. And what do the surfaces and equipment look like if they're using that sort of thing? So, for example, a gymnast, they might imagine their routine on the beam. They'd feel what the beam feels like. They'd be imagining how it looks like. They'd imagine how it feels to perform a backflip properly and that sort of thing. All right, concentration. This is just a general one for everyone, but in particular athletes, there's a difference between athletes' concentration and ours, because generally in everyday life we don't have an enormous crowd to perform in front of. So when athletes have to perform, they generally try and get by using a thing called selective attention. And so they block out all the unnecessary stimuli, and they just focus on exactly what they need to focus on. And imagery will help with this. They also need to make sure that there's no lapses in their concentration. And if this all sort of goes wrong, there's a thing that they experience called choking. And most of us experience this at some stage in life, where your performance actually deteriorates because you are so stressed and there's so much pressure to perform that you actually do it wrong. So there's a few famous examples in sport. I won't go through them, but often an athlete will put so much pressure on themselves, or someone else will put so much pressure on them, that their performance will actually just look ridiculous, to the point of the crowd thinking, I just can't believe they performed like that. And you think, well, what's this athlete thinking? But the thing is that the pressure has gotten to them so much that they've completely lost their focus, they've almost lost their mind, and they've choked. All right, so just in summary, you've got psychological skills training, or PST, on the left there, and then you've got a series of skills that they are. So you've got looking at sleep, optimal arousal, motivational techniques, mental imagery and concentration. and there's just a little description of them next to each one. So optimal arousal, being in the zone, motivational techniques, you've got intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, so looking at different types of motivation, setting goals. Mental imagery, which is deliberately focusing on the visual perfection, and also concentration, which is making sure that you have selective attention, trying to avoid choking by focusing properly. All right, thanks for watching.